Let's talk about 5 things that I hate about my Kimbo camper. What's going on, everyone? Back with another episode of Stuff and Things. Today we're talking about the 5 things that I hate about my Kimbo camper. I just finished the 5 things that I love about my Kimbo, so you can check out that video right up here in the corner. And to kick things off, being completely honest with you, going from the 5 things that I love video to the 5 things that I hate, they're opposites of each other. It is really difficult to find 5 things that I actually hate about the camper. Hate is a very strong word, and when you're going into getting something like a Kimbo camper or a Sprinter van or any camper RV for that matter, of course you're doing a lot of research. So going into owning a Kimbo, I knew there were some things that wouldn't be super ideal, and it may not be very convenient in some aspects, but that's all stuff that I went into knowing. So it's really hard to say that I hate anything that we're going to talk about in this video, but I guess a better way to describe it would be top 5 inconveniences or things that I would change about the Kimbo camper. So with all that being said, let's jump right into it with a topic that I've talked about in a few videos in the past. In the 5 things that I love about my Kimbo video, I talked about how much I love the Dickinson heater, and I've also done a full video on this heater in the past. In that video, I went over the pros and cons, and the cons are not something that I hate, but it's something that is like a minor inconvenience, and that is the temperature regulation inside of the Kimbo. Now, from the actual exterior shell point of the Kimbo, this thing does regulate its temperature pretty damn well. It never gets super hot in the summertime, and it generally doesn't get super cold in the winter either, and that has a lot to do with the overall construction of this thing, which I've talked about a lot in the past. Double pane windows over by the door, up by the bed, and right behind me here in the little nook. I've never found it to be insanely hot here in the Kimbo, but what I'm referring to as something that I don't really like is with the heater, it's harder to regulate the temperature. With the flame of this heater, it's either on or off. You can control the fan speed a little bit. You control how much propane is getting pumped into this thing. But once it gets warm in here, there's no way to regulate the temperature other than just like opening a window, which you guys may have seen me do in a previous video. I found that the best way to do this is to put the fan speed on low, maybe like medium. I typically keep it at a 90-degree angle, and then my gas, I keep it on low and almost a little bit below low, to a point where the flame is still on and it's like on the verge of turning off. I find that that is the most efficient way to run this thing because it's not going to get super hot in here immediately. And then if it does get a little bit too hot, what I've done is actually just crack the top vent on this fan here, and it keeps things nice and warm in here. Talking about like 70 to 75 degrees depending on the temperature outside. So temperature regulation in the cold environments is one of the things that is a little bit of an inconvenience. Now, the next thing on my list, I guess this is number 4, is going to be something that we also talked about in the love video, but the size of the camper. Now, like I mentioned in the love video, I do love the size of this thing. The height really doesn't bother me. The weight does not bother me at all either because I built my truck specific for this, but I can see how some people would find it to be an inconvenience. One of the biggest inconveniences as far as the height goes is obviously height restrictions when you're driving around. I've never ran into a bridge that was too low for me to pass underneath with the Kimbo, but you run into some common things like drive-thrus if you're trying to go to Starbucks and get coffee, or Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's. Most drive-thrus cap out at about 9 feet. Occasionally you will get lucky and go to a drive-thru that does not have any height restrictions, but for the most part I just have to park and walk inside of whatever restaurant I'm going into. And then there's also parking and parking garages. There is no chance this thing is fitting into pretty much any parking garage, and I just avoid them altogether. I really try to avoid cities altogether. So the size and the overall height of this thing can be a little bit inconvenient. Speaking of size, the size of this fridge. This is a module that I opted for. I wanted to have a fridge in here because I planned on living out of this thing for a little while. And because overall this is a small space, this fridge is also pretty dang small. It can be a little inconvenient at times. I can fit maybe like 3 to 4 days worth of food in here. But again, that is something that I knew about going into it. So having a small fridge like this really isn't something that I hate, but it's something that is a little bit inconvenient. And honestly, I've grown to live with this. I don't think I would actually change the size of this now, but it is something to keep in mind because you're going to be a little bit limited on the space because of the size. Now for number 3 on this list, kind of talking about temperature regulation again, but when I had my Kimbo built, I opted for the AC box right here, which as you guys can tell is not an AC anymore. So this is also something that I've talked about in a video in the past, and again, it's not something I hate, it's really just a minor inconvenience. If you do opt for the AC module when purchasing a Kimbo, one thing to note is that it will only run off of shore power or a generator. If you wanted to run that AC, you would need to start up a generator and actually plug in the camper on the outside right over here by the power unit. If I could do it over again, I would probably opt out of the AC entirely, simply for how I actually use this camper. I get it if you live in Florida or Texas and you're going to campgrounds and actually plugging in, or maybe you have room to carry a generator, then the AC could be great, but in my case, never used it. You actually have to plan ahead if you're going to use it because you have to remove the back panel that goes in between the camper and the truck. So if you have that thing off all the time and you're going to places where you can plug in, then you can run the AC no problem. So the AC in a Kimbo for my uses doesn't make sense at all, which is why it's on this list. I do, however, like the actual box here though, because of course I have a new power unit in here. This is just secondary power to the actual power of the camper itself. So this is where you will find me plugging in drone batteries, camera batteries, charging cell phones at night. It actually has a little light on here so I can light up sort of like the floor of the camper. And I actually like this box simply from like a storage perspective. I sealed everything off in here, so this is really just like a storage box now. This power unit happens to fit in here perfectly, but if I didn't need that extra power, I could put more storage boxes in here, and it really just gives you a little bit more space to utilize inside of the camper. Another thing with this box is that if you're hopping up into bed, you can kind of use it as a step to get up here. Now I could understand why people want to have all this stuff open if you're going to be building it out yourself, but I actually don't mind this box. I just kind of live with it now, and of course it does serve a purpose, but the AC is something that I don't need in my camper, and that's why it's on this list. Now for number 2 on this list, we're going to be talking about the sink. What I don't like about this sink is how small it is. I believe if I wanted to, I could make this sink a little bit bigger and actually like throw dishes and stuff in there. I do like the sink because it's better in my opinion than not having one entirely, but I think in the future I'm going to change things up with this sink. The bowl itself doesn't really bother me. I don't love the hand pump. I actually found a solution that I'm gonna implement in here sometime soon. So I will actually have a way to activate a water pump that is not going to be subjected to freezing or anything like that. Very easy to troubleshoot, just like the hand pump is, but it's going to be a lot more convenient. So I feel like the sink could be a little bit bigger, and that's something that I could do if I wanted to, because of course you can completely fix and change and modify and repair a Kimbo camper all by yourself. And the hand pump I don't love because if you are trying to wash your hands, you kind of have to like squirt water into your hand, get soap in there, and then lather up, and then you have a wet soapy hand you have to pump with. I do love the simplicity of it, but I feel like I have a solution that will make that a lot better, and I think I might bring you guys a video on changing that whole setup here sometime in the future. Again, it's hard to say that I hate any of these things. I don't hate the sink, I just feel like I could do things a little bit better myself, and that's what I'm gonna do. And now for the final thing, I guess this is number 1 on the list. This really isn't something that I completely hate, it just happened to make the list, and that is the drains. So speaking of the sink, of course, this basically just runs through a garden hose out into the bed of the truck. So if I am using water right now, the water is going to drain out and just sort of sit on the bed of the truck. That's not the worst thing ever, but if you are brushing your teeth and like spitting toothpaste in there and flushing it down, all that gunk is gonna sit in the bed of your truck, which is kind of gross. So the way you're supposed to use this sink is of course pull the hose out and let it drip on the outside of your bed, on the outside of the truck. I do use biodegradable soap and things like that in here because both of the drains are actually going outside. So if you want to use a sink drain, you do have to get out and put the hose on the outside of the truck. Same thing with the shower drain. So I'm currently sitting on like the little shower basin right here. Connect a shower curtain to some hooks on the roof right here, and then there's a tube running along the floor here which goes out of the propane door, and it's a pretty beefy tube. So for the few times that I have actually taken a shower in here, some of the things that are annoying about it is that I do have to open the propane door, and then I have to like wrestle with this hose that wants to be wrapped up inside, so I kind of like pin it down underneath the C4 bumper or kind of run it along the side of my tailgate just to keep it flowing out. And where this drain is positioned, it's sort of like back down here in the corner. So if you are planning on taking a shower, you actually want to angle the truck with a rear bias. There was a time that I took a shower in here and the truck wasn't quite level, so the drain was not draining. And the whole shower basin kind of filled up with water, and then I was just kind of like pushing it down the drain with my foot, which is not super convenient. Now that is something that I probably won't change. It is a minor inconvenience, but it's something that I think about now. If I know I'm gonna shower when I get to a campsite, I want to kind of have the truck back at an angle. So those are the 5 things that I hate. Not really hate, they're just minor inconveniences or things that I would change about my Kimbo camper. And other than that, I truly really love this thing. So if you guys haven't caught the last video, I'll leave a link for that again up there in the corner or in the description down below. And if you have any questions on anything that I mentioned here in this video, feel free to drop those in the comments down below and we can have a little bit of a discussion. Now, if you're new to this channel, consider clicking subscribe. I make new videos every week. As always, thank you for watching. I'll talk to you in the next one.